Have you ever made a split-second decision that changed your entire life? Maybe you were watching this from your cozy living room in Texas, or perhaps you're tuning in during your lunch break in New York. Wherever you are right now, comment below and let me know where you're watching from, because I want you to imagine yourself in Luna's position tonight. What would you have done when you realized a stranger's life was in your hands? The note trembled between her fingers as she watched him bring the glass to his lips. Don't drink it. Act normal and leave. Now, 3 sentences that could save a life or destroy her own. But let me back up and tell you how Luna Castellanos found herself holding a stranger's fate in her hands at 2 in the morning on a Tuesday that started like any other. Luna had been working the late shift at Meridian, one of Chicago's most exclusive bars, for exactly 8 months and 16 days. Not that she was counting or anything. The job paid better than her previous 3 combined, which was the only reason she tolerated the pretentious clientele who treated her like expensive furniture and tipped like she should be grateful for the privilege of serving them. At 24, Luna had learned that survival meant keeping her head down, her observations to herself, and her opinions locked away behind a practiced smile. She was good at reading people. Too good sometimes. It was a skill that had kept her fed and housed since aging out of foster care at 18, but tonight it might get her killed. The man at table 7 had caught her attention the moment he walked in. Not because he was particularly handsome, though the expensive cut of his charcoal suit and the way it fit his tall frame suggested money and power. Not because of his dark hair, perfectly styled despite the late hour, or the olive skin that spoke of Mediterranean heritage. It was his eyes that made her pause in polishing the wine glass she'd been holding for the past 30 seconds. Green-gray eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of the room in one sweeping glance before settling on her with an intensity that made her stomach flutter in a way she absolutely did not have time for. He moved with the kind of confidence that suggested he was used to being the most dangerous person in any room, which in this neighborhood, full of politicians and white-collar criminals, was probably saying something. He'd requested a table rather than sitting at the bar, unusual for someone dining alone at this hour. Even more unusual was a specific request for table 7, tucked into the back corner with clear sight lines to both exits and the kitchen door. Luna had waitressed long enough to recognize when someone was positioning themselves strategically. Luna, table 7 wants the Macallan 25. Neat, her manager Derek had said, sliding past her toward the kitchen. Make it special. He's a VIP. She'd prepared the drink carefully, using their finest crystal, but something had nagged at her as she'd garnered the whiskey. Maybe it was the way Derek had emphasized the word special. Maybe it was the nervous energy radiating from Miguel, their usually unflappable head chef, who kept glancing toward table 7 while issuing hushed instructions to his prep cooks. Or maybe it was the way Derek had insisted on personally inspecting the glass before she served it, his hands trembling slightly as he'd held it up to the light. Luna had excellent hearing, a byproduct of growing up in foster homes where survival often depended on knowing what was happening in the next room. As she'd waited for Derek's approval, she'd caught fragments of conversation from the kitchen that made her blood run cold. Special preparation for table 7. Just like we discussed. He won't taste anything until it's too late. Make sure the bartender delivers it personally. We need a witness to see him drink it willingly. The implications hit her like ice water. Someone wanted the man at table 7 dead, and they wanted it to look like an accident. Or maybe they wanted it to look like suicide. Either way, they were planning to use her as an unwitting accessory to murder. Luna's hands had started shaking as Derek placed the glass on her serving tray with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Remember, Luna, make sure he drinks it before you leave the table. Very important. She nodded and forced her expression into neutrality, but her mind was racing. She could pretend she hadn't heard anything. She could deliver the drink, collect her tip, and finish her shift. The smart thing to do would be to keep her head down and her mouth shut, just like she'd learned to do in every foster home, every job, every situation where speaking up meant risking everything. But as she looked across the dimly lit restaurant at the man sitting alone at table 7, something in her chest had twisted painfully. He was reading something on his phone, completely unaware that his next sip would be his last. There was something almost lonely about the picture he made, this powerful man dining alone in the small hours of the morning. Luna had always been a sucker for strays and lost causes. It was a weakness that had gotten her in trouble more times than she could count, but she'd never been able to ignore someone in need, even if helping them might destroy her. So she grabbed a cocktail napkin and quickly scrawled her warning in the dim light of the service station. Her handwriting was terrible, rushed, and barely legible, but it would have to do. Don't drink it. Act normal and leave. Now, which brought her to this moment, standing beside table 7 with her heart hammering against her ribs as she set down the glass of poison whiskey and slipped the folded napkin under the edge of his phone. The man looked up at her, and she was struck again by the intensity of his gaze. Up close, she could see the faint lines around his eyes that suggested he was older than she'd initially thought, probably in his early 30s. There was something hard in his expression, a wariness that spoke of a life lived on guard. "Thank you," he said, his voice carrying the faintest trace of an accent she couldn't place. His fingers moved to unfold the napkin, and Luna held her breath. She watched his expression change as he read her warning. The casual relaxation bled out of his posture, replaced by a tension that reminded her of a predator recognizing a threat. His green-gray eyes snapped up to hers, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to squirm. Instead of standing and walking away like any sensible person would do, he reached out and wrapped his fingers around her wrist. Not roughly, but with enough pressure to keep her in place. His skin was warm against hers, and she could feel calluses on his palm that suggested his hands weren't just used for signing checks. "Why?" he asked quietly, his thumb pressing against her pulse point where it was jumping like a startled bird. Luna glanced around quickly, acutely aware that Derek and possibly others were watching this interaction. She needed to make this look normal, like she was just taking his order or answering a question about the menu. "Because you don't deserve to die tonight," she whispered, leaning slightly closer as if she were explaining the evening specials. Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of surprise followed by what might have been respect. He released her wrist, but didn't look away. "What's your name?" he asked. "Luna Castellanos." "Luna." He repeated her name like he was testing how it sounded, and the way his accent shaped the syllables made her stomach flutter again. "I'm Dante Romano." The name meant nothing to her, but the way he said it suggested it should. There was weight behind it, significance that she was missing. Dante glanced down at the untouched whiskey, then back at her face. "You realize what you've just done? Hopefully saved your life." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, the first genuine expression she'd seen from him. "You may have just signed your own death warrant in the process." The casual way he said it should have terrified her, but instead Luna felt a strange sense of calm settling over her shoulders. She made her choice. Right or wrong, she couldn't take it back now. "Maybe," she said, "but at least I'll be able to live with myself. Assuming you live at all." Dante's expression grew serious again. "Who else knows about this?" "I don't know. Derek, obviously. Maybe the kitchen staff. I'm not sure how many people are involved." Dante nodded slowly, his gaze moving past her to catalog the restaurant's other occupants. Luna suddenly realized how exposed they were, having this conversation in full view of whoever wanted him dead. "We need to leave," Dante said, rising from his chair with fluid grace. "Together. I can't just leave work. I need this job." His hand found her elbow, gentle but insistent. "Luna, look at me." She did, and the gravity in his expression made her pulse stutter. "The people who wanted me dead tonight won't hesitate to eliminate any witnesses. Staying here isn't just dangerous for you. It's suicide." The reality of her situation hit her like a physical blow. She thought she was just saving a stranger's life, but she'd actually walk herself into the middle of something much bigger and more dangerous than she could have imagined. "I don't understand what's happening," she admitted. "I know, but I promise I'll explain everything once we're somewhere safe. Do you trust me?" It was an absurd question. She didn't know him. She had no reason to trust a man who spoke casually about death warrants and carried himself like violence was just another tool in his arsenal. But as she looked into those green-gray eyes, she found herself nodding. Yes, good girl. Stay close to me. Dante dropped several $100 bills on the table, far more than necessary for a drink he'd never touched. Then he placed his hand on the small of her back and guided her toward the exit, moving with the kind of purposeful calm that suggested he'd done this before. Luna was acutely aware of his presence beside her as they walked. He was taller than she'd realized, probably 6 foot to her 5'6", and the hand resting against her spine radiated warmth through the thin fabric of her work blouse. She could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated that made her want to lean closer. Behind them, she heard Derek's voice calling her name, sharp with something that might have been panic. "Don't look back," Dante murmured, his breath warm against her ear. "Just keep walking." They'd almost reached the door when Luna heard footsteps moving quickly behind them. Her muscles tensed, but Dante's hand pressed more firmly against her back, steadying her. "Whatever happens next, stay behind me," he said quietly. The door was just 5 feet away when Derek's voice rang out across the restaurant. "Excuse me, sir. There's been a mistake with your check." Dante paused, his shoulders straightening almost imperceptibly. When he turned, Luna saw that his expression had changed completely. The man who'd smiled at her moments ago was gone, replaced by someone whose very presence seemed to lower the temperature in the room. "No mistake," Dante said, his voice carrying easily across the space between them. Everything was exactly as it should be. Derek had been joined by 2 men Luna didn't recognize, both wearing the kind of cheap suits that suggested muscle for hire rather than legitimate business. One of them had his hand inside his jacket, and Luna didn't need much imagination to guess what he was reaching for. "Sir, I'm going to have to insist you come back to your table," Derek said, but his voice was shaking now. "There are some gentlemen who would like to speak with you." Dante's laugh was soft and utterly without humor. "I'm sure there are." What happened next occurred so quickly that Luna almost missed it. Dante moved with a speed and precision that spoke of extensive training, crossing the distance between them and the 2 hired guns in heartbeats. There was a brief, violent scuffle, the sound of breaking glass and muffled grunts, and then both men were on the ground. Derek had gone pale, backing toward the kitchen with his hands raised. "Tell your employers they missed their chance," Dante said conversationally, straightening his tie as if nothing had happened. "And, Derek, if I see you again, it won't end with just a conversation." He returned to Luna's side, once again placing his hand on her back to guide her toward the exit. She was trembling now, the reality of the violence she'd just witnessed hitting her in waves. Outside, the Chicago night air was sharp with the promise of winter. Dante led her to a sleek black car parked at the curb, some expensive model she didn't recognize. "Get in," he said, opening the passenger door. Luna hesitated, looking back at the restaurant where she'd worked for the past 8 months. Through the windows, she could see Derek on the phone, probably calling for backup or an ambulance for his unconscious associates. "There's no going back now," Dante said gently, following her gaze. "You saved my life tonight, Luna Castellanos. Now let me save yours." She slid into the passenger seat, immediately surrounded by the smell of leather and that same understated cologne. Dante closed her door and walked around to the driver's side, moving with the same purposeful calm he'd shown inside. As they pulled away from the curb, Luna caught a glimpse of her reflection in the side mirror. She looked the same as she had that morning. Dark brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, brown eyes wide with uncertainty, olive skin that spoke of her Mexican heritage. But something fundamental had changed. The woman looking back at her had crossed a line tonight, and there was no going back to who she'd been before. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safe," Dante replied, his hand steady on the steering wheel. "Somewhere I can explain why someone wanted me dead, and why helping me was the most dangerous thing you've ever done." Luna leaned back against the leather seat and tried to process what had just happened. 12 hours ago, her biggest concern had been whether she'd have enough in tips to make rent this month. Now, she was driving through Chicago in the middle of the night with a stranger who'd just disabled two armed men without breaking a sweat. She should be terrified. She should be demanding he let her out at the nearest police station. Instead, she found herself stealing glances at his profile as city lights painted moving shadows across his features. Dante Romano, whoever he really was, had just turned her quiet, predictable life completely upside down. And despite everything, Luna couldn't bring herself to regret warning him about that poisoned drink. The car ride through downtown Chicago passed in tense silence, broken only by the soft hum of the engine and the occasional buzz of Dante's phone. Luna watched him decline call after call, without even glancing at the screen, his jaw set in a hard line that suggested whoever was trying to reach him would have to wait. She used the quiet to study his profile in the shifting glow of streetlights. There was something almost classical about his features, like he could have stepped out of a Renaissance painting. Strong nose, defined cheekbones, full lips that she absolutely should not be noticing given the circumstances. But it was the tension in his shoulders that held her attention, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel with controlled precision. This was a man accustomed to danger, she realized. The violence back at Meridian hadn't been a lucky break or adrenaline-fueled desperation. He'd moved like someone with extensive training, someone who'd done this before. "Do you have somewhere safe to go tonight?" he asked suddenly, his voice cutting through her observations. Luna blinked, refocusing on the question. "What do you mean?" "I mean your apartment, your usual routine, anywhere those people might expect to find you. None of that is safe anymore." The reality of her situation hit her again, a cold weight settling in her stomach. She lived alone in a studio apartment in Pilsen, barely big enough for her bed and the tiny kitchen table she'd found at a thrift store. No security system, no doorman, just a flimsy chain lock that wouldn't stop a determined teenager, much less professional killers. "I have an apartment," she said slowly. "But no, I guess it's not safe. Family you could stay with? Friends?" Luna was quiet for a long moment, watching the city blur past her window. This was the part of her life she never talked about, the reality that made her different from most people her age. While her coworkers complained about overbearing parents or annoying siblings, Luna had learned long ago to be completely self-sufficient. "No," she said finally. "There's no one." Dante glanced at her, something shifting in his expression. "No one at all. I aged out of foster care when I turned 18. Never got adopted. Never found my forever family or whatever they call in the movies. I've been on my own since then." She'd meant to sound matter-of-fact, but something vulnerable crept into her voice despite her best efforts. Luna hated talking about her past, hated the way people looked at her when they learned she was essentially an orphan. Pity or discomfort, sometimes both, but never just acceptance. Dante was quiet for several blocks, processing this information. When he spoke again, his voice was gentler than before. "I'm sorry. That must have been difficult." Luna shrugged, a gesture she'd perfected over the years. "It is what it is. I learned to take care of myself." "I can see that." Dante's tone held something like respect. Most people would have delivered that drink without question, even if they suspected something was wrong. "It takes courage to do what you did tonight. Or stupidity. Maybe both. But I'm grateful for your stupidity." Despite everything, Luna found herself smiling. "So where exactly are we going?" "My penthouse. It's secure, and I can make sure you're protected while I figure out who wanted me dead and why." The casual way he mentioned having a penthouse made Luna acutely aware of the differences between them. She was wearing a uniform blouse from Target and shoes she'd resold twice because she couldn't afford new ones. He was discussing real estate that probably cost more than she'd make in several lifetimes. As if sensing her discomfort, Dante added, "It's temporary, just until the immediate threat is dealt with." They pulled up to a gleaming high-rise in River North, all glass and steel reaching toward the cloudy night sky. A valet appeared immediately to take the car, nodding respectfully to Dante, as if his arrival at 2:30 in the morning was perfectly normal. The lobby was all marble and understated luxury, the kind of place where Luna would normally feel completely out of place. But Dante's hand found the small of her back again, that warm, steadying pressure that somehow made her feel like she belonged here, at least temporarily. The elevator ride to the top floor was swift and silent. Luna caught her reflection in the polished steel doors and winced. Her ponytail was coming loose, her makeup smudged, her uniform wrinkled from the evening's drama. She looked like exactly what she was, a working-class woman who'd stumbled into a world way above her pay grade. The elevator opened directly into Dante's penthouse, and Luna's first impression was space. Massive floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan and the Chicago skyline. The furniture was modern and expensive-looking, all clean lines and neutral colors that probably had specific designer names she'd never heard of. Luna stepped inside and immediately felt smaller, like she was trespassing in a museum exhibit titled How the Other Half Lives. "Make yourself comfortable," Dante said, tossing his keys into a bowl that looked like it might be actual crystal. "Can I get you something to drink? Water, coffee, something stronger?" "Water would be great." She wandered toward the windows while he moved to what she assumed was the kitchen. The view was spectacular, Chicago spread out below them like a glittering circuit board. She'd lived in this city her entire life, but had never seen it from this angle, from this height. It made her feel both insignificant and strangely powerful. "Here," Dante said, appearing beside her with a glass of water and something amber-colored for himself. "Thank you." Luna accepted the glass, acutely aware when their fingers brushed during the exchange. His hands were exactly as she remembered from the restaurant. Warm, slightly calloused, completely steady. They stood side by side, looking out at the city, and Luna found herself hyper-aware of everything about him. The way he'd rolled up his sleeves, revealing muscular forearms. The faint scent of his cologne mixed with something that was purely him. The way he moved with complete confidence in his own space. "So," she said finally, breaking the silence that was becoming charged with something she wasn't ready to examine. "Are you going to tell me who you really are?" Dante took a sip of his drink, considering his words carefully. "My full name is Dante Romano. I'm the head of the Romano family organization." The way he said family made Luna think this wasn't about blood relatives and Sunday dinners. "You mean," like Luna paused, try to find a polite way to phrase it, "like the Mafia?" "Among other things, yes. We handle various business interests throughout Chicago and beyond. Some legal, some less so." Luna set down her water glass, needing a moment to process this information. She just saved the life of an actual crime boss, not someone pretending to be dangerous for show, not someone who'd seen too many movies. The real thing. "Are you afraid?" Dante asked quietly, watching her reaction. Luna considered the question seriously. She should be terrified. She should be demanding to leave immediately. But as she looked at him, seeing the way he was trying to gauge her response, all she felt was curiosity. "Maybe I should be," she said honestly. "But mostly I'm trying to understand why someone would want to kill you. Take your pick. Rival families looking to expand territory, business partners who feel they've been cheated, politicians who want to renegotiate our arrangements. When you're in my position, the list of potential enemies is always longer than you'd like. And now I'm on that list too, because I helped you." Dante's expression darkened. "Yes. Which is why you can't go back to your normal life until this is resolved. It's not safe." Luna walked over to his kitchen, needing something to do with her hands while she processed this information. The space was incredible, all professional-grade appliances and pristine marble countertops. Her entire apartment could fit in this kitchen. "How long are we talking about?" she asked, running her fingers along the edge of the counter. "I don't know yet. Could be days, could be weeks. Depends on how quickly I can identify who was behind tonight's attempt and neutralize the threat." The casual way he said neutralize sent a small shiver down her spine. Luna was beginning to understand that in Dante's world, problems were solved with permanent solutions. "I'll lose my job at Meridian," she said, the practical implications starting to hit her. "My apartment, my routine, everything. I'll take care of your expenses while you're under my protection. Rent, bills, whatever you need." Luna's spine stiffened. "I don't want your money." "It's not charity," Dante said, moving closer. "You're in this situation because you chose to save my life. Taking care of you while you're in danger is the least I can do." There was something in his voice, a sincerity that made her believe he wasn't trying to buy her or make her dependent on him. But accepting his help felt like crossing another line, admitting that her life really had changed completely. "I need to call my manager, tell him I won't be coming to work for a while." Dante shook his head. "No contact with your previous life until this is resolved. Anyone could be watching, listening. Your phone, your usual communications, all of that is compromised now." Luna felt a surge of panic at the idea of being completely cut off from everything familiar. Even though she didn't have close friends or family, she had routines, places she went, people who at least recognized her face. The thought of disappearing completely was overwhelming. "Hey," Dante said softly, apparently reading her expression. "Look at me." She did, and found herself caught by the intensity of his green-gray eyes. "I know this is a lot. I know you didn't ask for any of this. But I promise you, I will keep you safe. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, you have my word." "Why?" Luna asked. "You don't even know me. You saved my life tonight without expecting anything in return. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." The way he said it made something warm unfurl in her chest, a feeling she'd almost forgotten existed. When was the last time someone had spoken about her character, her choices, with such certainty and respect? "There's a guest room down the hall," Dante continued. "Everything you need should be there. Clothes, toiletries, whatever. We can figure out the rest tomorrow." Luna nodded, suddenly exhausted by the emotional whiplash of the evening. A few hours ago, she'd been worried about making rent. Now she was standing in a penthouse with a crime boss who'd promised to protect her with his life. "Dante," she said as he started to turn away. "Yes. Thank you for not letting me face this alone." Something shifted in his expression, a vulnerability that hadn't been there before. "You don't have to thank me, Luna. You should never have been alone in the first place." The way he said it made her think he wasn't just talking about tonight's crisis. There was something in his voice that suggested he understood loneliness, understood what it felt like to handle everything by yourself because there was no other choice. As she walked down the hallway to the guest room, Luna found herself thinking about the warmth of his hand on her back, the way he'd said her name, the promise in his voice when he'd sworn to protect her. Tomorrow she would have to figure out what came next, how to navigate this dangerous new world she'd stumbled into. But tonight, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Luna fell asleep knowing that someone else was watching out for her safety. In a master bedroom down the hall, Dante stood at his own window, looking out at the same view while nursing his second drink of the night. He should be planning his next move, identifying threats, calling his security team. Instead, he found himself thinking about the courage it had taken for Luna to slip him that warning, the way she'd looked at him without flinching when he'd told her what he really was. Most people in his world were there because of blood, obligation, or fear. Luna had chosen to save him simply because it was the right thing to do. That kind of moral clarity was rare in his experience and dangerously appealing. Dante finished his drink and forced himself to focus on practical matters. Someone had wanted him dead tonight, and they'd used Luna's workplace to try to make it happen. That meant they knew his routines, his preferences, possibly his entire schedule. He had enemies to identify and eliminate. But first, he had to make sure the woman sleeping in his guest room stayed safe. Because Dante was beginning to realize that Luna Castellanos had become much more than just a witness he needed to protect. She was becoming something he couldn't afford to lose. Luna woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the unfamiliar scent of expensive linens. For a moment, she lay still, trying to orient herself in the massive bed that could have easily fit 3 people. The guest room was larger than her entire apartment, decorated in the same neutral tones as the rest of Dante's penthouse. Reality crashed back as she remembered the events of the previous night. The poisoned drink, the violent confrontation, the car ride through Chicago with a crime boss who'd promised to protect her. She was living in his penthouse now, completely dependent on a man she'd known for less than 12 hours. The smell of coffee drifted through the air, rich and inviting. Luna's stomach growled in response, reminding her that she'd been too nervous to eat dinner during her shift at Meridian. She found clothes laid out at the foot of the bed, simple but obviously expensive pieces in her approximate size. Dark jeans that fit perfectly, a soft cashmere sweater in deep blue, undergarments still bearing designer tags. The thoughtfulness of the gesture made her chest tighten with an emotion she didn't want to examine too closely. When was the last time someone had anticipated her needs without being asked? She couldn't remember. Luna made her way to the kitchen, following the scent of coffee and something that smelled like bacon. She found Dante standing at the stove, his back to her, wearing dark jeans and a white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. He looked different in casual clothes, less intimidating but somehow more attractive. The morning light streaming through the windows highlighted the strong line of his shoulders and the easy way he moved around the kitchen. "Good morning," he said without turning around. "Coffee's ready. How did you sleep?" "Better than I expected," Luna admitted, moving toward the coffee maker. "The guest room is beautiful." "Thank you." She poured herself a cup and wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic, using it as an excuse to study Dante's profile. There was something domestic and peaceful about this scene that felt surreal given the circumstances. Like they were a couple sharing breakfast after a normal night's sleep instead of strangers thrown together by attempted murder. "I hope you're hungry," Dante said, turning to face her with a plate in each hand. "I wasn't sure what you liked, so I made a little of everything." The plates were loaded with scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, fresh fruit, and what looked like homemade hash browns. Luna's eyes widened at the abundance. "You made all this?" Dante's mouth curved in a small smile. "Surprised?" "A little," she admitted. "I figured someone in your position would have people to handle things like cooking." "I do, when necessary. But I prefer to take care of the important things myself." The way he said important made her stomach flutter. Luna busied herself with her breakfast, trying not to read too much into his choice of words. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, but Luna could sense tension building in Dante's shoulders. His phone had been buzzing intermittently since she'd entered the kitchen, and she could see him fighting the urge to check it. "You can answer that," she said. "I know last night probably created some complications for your business." Dante glanced at her, something like gratitude flickering in his expression. "Thank you. This shouldn't take long." He stepped away to answer the call, moving toward the windows where his voice wouldn't carry as clearly. But Luna had always been good at hearing things she probably shouldn't, and fragments of conversation reached her anyway. "How many casualties on our side?" Dante asked, his tone sharp and professional. Luna's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Casualties implied this went far beyond a simple poisoning attempt. "No," he continued, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "I want to know exactly who knew about my dinner plans." Someone on the inside fed them information. The mention of inside information made Luna's blood chill. If someone in Dante's own organization was working against him, then nowhere was truly safe. Not even this penthouse. Dante's voice grew more heated as the conversation continued. "The Torino family thinks they can make a move on our territory while I'm dealing with this threat? That's their mistake." Torino family. Luna filed the name away, though she hoped she'd never need to use it. "Increase security at all our locations," Dante ordered. "I want eyes on every business, every operation. And Marco, find out everything you can about the staff at Meridian. Someone there was working with our enemies, and I want to know who." Luna set down her fork, her appetite disappearing. The scope of what she'd stumbled into was becoming clearer, and it was much larger than she'd imagined. This wasn't just about one failed assassination attempt. This was about territory wars and family conflicts that probably went back generations. When Dante returned to the kitchen, his expression was grim. "Bad news?" Luna asked. "Could be worse. The attempt on my life was part of a larger, coordinated attack. They hit 3 of our businesses last night while their people were trying to poison me." Luna felt the blood drain from her face. "How many people were hurt?" Dante's jaw tightened. 6 of my men were injured. 2 are in critical condition." The weight of guilt settled on Luna's shoulders like a lead blanket. If she hadn't warned him, if he'd drunk that poison whiskey, would those men still be safe? Had her decision to save one life put others in danger? "This isn't your fault," Dante said quietly, apparently reading her expression. "Isn't it? If you'd been incapacitated or killed, maybe they wouldn't have needed to attack your businesses." Dante moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne and see the flecks of gold in his green-gray eyes. "Luna, look at me." She did, though it took effort to meet his gaze. "The Torino family has been planning this move for months. My death would have made it easier, but they were always going to make their play for our territory. Your warning didn't cause this violence. It prevented them from succeeding. But your men are still hurt because of choices I made. My men are hurt because our enemies chose violence. There's a difference." Luna wanted to believe him, but the guilt still sat heavy in her chest. She thought she was making a simple moral choice, saving a stranger's life. She hadn't considered the ripple effects, the way her actions might impact dozens of other people. "Tell me about your world," she said, needing to understand what she'd gotten herself into. "Your family, your business, all of it." Dante leaned against the counter, considering where to start. "My father built the Romano organization from nothing. He came to Chicago from Sicily in the 1970s with $10 and a determination to never be powerless again." There was pride in Dante's voice when he spoke of his father, but also something that might have been sadness. He started small. Protection services for neighborhood businesses, loans for families who couldn't get help from banks, settling disputes that the police couldn't or wouldn't handle. It grew from there. That sounds almost noble when you put it that way. Some of it was. My father genuinely believed he was serving his community, providing services that no one else would provide. But power has a way of corrupting even good intentions. What happened to him? Cancer took him when I was 26. I inherited leadership of the organization along with all the enemies he'd made over the years. Luna studied Dante's profile as he spoke, noting the way his jaw tightened when he mentioned his father's death. She was beginning to understand that his dangerous reputation had been shaped by loss and responsibility thrust upon him too young. "Do you ever think about walking away?" she asked. "Doing something else with your life?" Dante's laugh was bitter. "Every day. But it's not that simple. The Romano family employs over 200 people in various capacities. We provide income for their families, protection for their neighborhoods, stability in communities that the government has forgotten. Walking away would leave them vulnerable to people far worse than me. So you're trapped. We all make choices, Luna. I chose to honor my father's legacy and protect the people who depend on us. That choice comes with consequences." Luna found herself moved by the resignation in his voice, the weight of responsibility he carried. She'd assumed that being the head of a crime family meant unlimited power and freedom. She was beginning to see that it might actually mean the opposite. "What about you?" Dante asked, clearly wanting to shift the conversation away from his burdens. "Tell me about your dreams, your goals. What were you working toward before last night changed everything?" Luna felt heat rise in her cheeks. Her dreams seemed small and naive compared to his world of family legacies and territorial wars. "Culinary school," she said quietly. "I've been saving every penny for the past 2 years to apply to the Culinary Institute. I want to be a chef, maybe open my own restaurant someday." Dante's expression brightened with genuine interest. "That's why you were so comfortable in my kitchen this morning. I noticed you knew your way around the space. I love cooking. It's the one thing that's always made sense to me, you know? You follow the recipe, put in the work, and you create something that brings people joy. There's something pure about that. What kind of cuisine do you want to focus on?" "Mexican fusion, mostly. Combining the flavors I grew up with in foster homes with French techniques. I want to elevate comfort food, make it something special." The passion in her voice seemed to captivate Dante. Luna realized she'd never spoken about her culinary dreams with such enthusiasm to anyone before. Most people in her life saw cooking as just another service job, not as an art form or a calling. "That sounds incredible," Dante said. "How close were you to having enough for tuition?" "About halfway there. I was hoping to apply for the spring semester, maybe get some financial aid to cover the rest." The past tense hurt more than Luna had expected. Her carefully planned future felt impossibly distant now, separated from her by violence and circumstances she couldn't control. "We'll figure something out," Dante said firmly. Once this threat is resolved, once you're safe, we'll make sure you can pursue your dreams. You don't need to do that. Yes, I do. Your life got derailed because you chose to save mine. Making sure you don't lose your future is the least I can do. There is something in his voice, a determination that made Luna believe he meant every word. But accepting his help felt like admitting that her independence was gone, that she really had become dependent on him for everything. The afternoon passed quietly. Dante handled business calls while Luna explored the penthouse, familiarizing herself with her temporary home. The space was beautiful but impersonal, like a high-end hotel suite. There were no family photos, no personal mementos, nothing that revealed who Dante was beyond his wealth and power. As evening approached, Luna found herself restless. She was used to working, to staying busy, and the enforced leisure was making her anxious. When she discovered Dante's impressive kitchen fully stocked with high-end ingredients, inspiration struck. "What are you doing?" Dante asked, finding her pulling items from the refrigerator. "Making dinner. I need to keep my hands busy, and you've got an amazing kitchen that's clearly underutilized." Luna began prepping ingredients for chicken mole, one of her signature dishes. She could feel Dante watching her work, his attention like a physical presence that made her hyper-aware of every movement. "Can I help?" he asked. Luna glanced up at him, surprised. "Do you want to? I like to learn. Watching you cook is fascinating." The compliment made her chest warm with pleasure. Luna handed him a knife and showed him how to dice onions properly, standing close enough to guide his hand when his technique wavered. The casual touches sent electricity shooting up her arm, and she found herself lingering longer than necessary, enjoying the warmth of his skin against hers. "Like this," she murmured, covering his hand with hers to demonstrate the proper motion. Dante went very still, his attention focused entirely on the point where their hands connected. Luna looked up to find him watching her face instead of the knife work, his green-gray eyes dark with something that made her pulse stutter. For a moment, they stood frozen like that, hands linked, faces close enough that Luna could feel the warmth of his breath. The air between them felt charged, heavy with possibilities that both thrilled and terrified her. Dante leaned closer, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. Luna's eyes fluttered closed, her body swaying toward his as if drawn by magnetic force. The sharp buzz of Dante's phone shattered the moment. He jerked back, releasing her hand and stepping away as he answered the call. "Romano," he said, his voice sharp with frustration. Luna turned back to the stove, her hands shaking slightly as she stirred the mole sauce. She could hear Dante's voice growing tense as he listened to whoever was on the other end. When he demanded, "How many of them?" Luna's stomach dropped. Something else had happened. "Increase the security detail around the penthouse," Dante ordered. "I want eyes on every entrance, every exit, and give me everything you can find about Torino family movements in the past week." When he hung up, Luna turned to face him. "What's wrong?" "Someone's been asking questions about you. The Torino family knows you were at Meridian last night, and they're trying to track down who you are." The sauce suddenly tasted like ash in Luna's mouth. So much for being protected by Dante's fortress in the sky. "How long before they find me?" she asked. Dante's expression was grim as he moved to the window, scanning the street below for any sign of surveillance. "If they're as thorough as I think they are, not long enough." As night fell over Chicago, Luna found herself unable to sleep despite the exhaustion weighing down her limbs. She kept thinking about Dante's hands covering hers, the way he'd looked at her in the kitchen, the almost kiss that had left her body humming with unfulfilled desire. Around midnight, she gave up on sleep and padded to the kitchen for water. She was surprised to find light spilling from Dante's study, the door partially open. Through the crack, she could see him sitting at his desk, surrounded by papers and photographs, a glass of whiskey at his elbow. He'd changed into a white t-shirt that showed off the muscular lines of his arms and chest, and his dark hair was mussed as if he'd been running his hands through it. The picture he made was both powerful and vulnerable. This dangerous man, working alone in the small hours of the morning to protect everyone who depended on him. Luna knocked softly on the doorframe. Can't sleep either? Dante looked up, his expression softening when he saw her. Cool mean, you might as well know what we're dealing with. Luna approached his desk, noting the surveillance photos and family trees spread across the surface. The Torino family organizational chart was extensive, showing connections to politicians, judges, and business leaders throughout the city. They're bigger than you are, she observed. In pure numbers, yes. But they're also more fractured. Multiple factions, competing interests, old grudges that split their loyalty. That's what I'm hoping to exploit. Luna studied a photograph of a man in his 50s with cold eyes and an expensive suit. Vincent Torino, the caption read, "Family patriarch. He's the one who wants you dead?" Among others. Vincent sees our territory as the natural expansion for his operations. My death would create a power vacuum he could exploit. And now I'm leverage against you. Dante's jaw tightened. No one will use you to hurt me, Luna. I won't allow it. The fierce certainty in his voice made something flutter in her chest. Luna had spent her entire adult life taking care of herself, never relying on anyone else for protection or support. Having someone speak about defending her with such absolute conviction was both thrilling and terrifying. You barely know me, she said softly. Why does my safety matter so much to you? Dante was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face as if trying to memorize every detail. Because in 24 hours, you've shown me more genuine courage and compassion than I've seen in years in my world. Because you saved my life without expecting anything in return. Because when I look at you, I remember what it feels like to want something besides power and control. Luna's breath caught at the honesty in his voice. She could see the loneliness he carried, the isolation that came with his position, the way responsibility had shaped him into someone who trusted few people and let even fewer close to his heart. I've been alone my entire life, she said quietly. I understand what that feels like. You don't have to be alone anymore, Dante replied, his voice rough with emotion. The words hung between them like a promise, heavy with implications that Luna wasn't sure she was ready to explore. But as she looked into his green-gray eyes, seeing the sincerity and vulnerability he rarely allowed anyone to witness, she felt something shift in her chest. Maybe they were both tired of carrying their burdens alone. Maybe they found in each other something worth fighting for. Luna woke the next morning to find Dante already gone from the penthouse. A note on the kitchen counter, written in his precise handwriting, explained that he'd gone to handle business related to their security situation and would return by afternoon. The casual way he'd signed it with just his initial made something flutter in her chest that she tried to ignore. She spent the morning restlessly exploring the penthouse again, familiarizing herself with every detail of her temporary prison. Because that's what it was, really, despite the luxury. She couldn't leave, couldn't contact anyone from her previous life, couldn't even go out on the balcony without potentially exposing herself to surveillance. By the time Dante returned around 2 in the afternoon, Luna had worked herself into a state of anxious determination. She was tired of being protected from information that directly concerned her life and safety. We need to talk, she said the moment he walked through the door. Dante took one look at her expression and nodded. All right, what do you want to know? Everything. I want to know exactly what kind of danger I'm in, who wants to hurt me, and why. No more protecting me from the details. Dante set down his keys and studied her face for a long moment, as if weighing how much truth she could handle. Finally, he gestured toward the living room. Sit down. This is going to take a while. Luna settled onto his expensive sofa while Dante poured himself a drink. Even in the afternoon light, he looked tired, the weight of his responsibilities evident in the set of his shoulders. The Torino family has been trying to expand into our territory for the past 3 years. He began, joining her on the sofa, but maintaining careful distance between them. They've been patient, methodical, waiting for the right moment to make their move. What makes this the right moment? Several factors. Our legitimate businesses have been performing well, making our operations more attractive. We lost some key allies last year when the Benedetti family decided to relocate to Miami. And Dante paused, taking a sip of his whiskey Vincent Torino believes I'm not as strong a leader as my father was. Are you? The question slipped out before Luna could stop herself, but Dante didn't seem offended. If anything, he looked almost relieved by her directness. I don't know, he admitted. My father ruled through a combination of respect, fear, and genuine care for his people. He had 30 years to build those relationships, to establish his reputation. I've had 6 years, and most of that time has been spent trying to prevent exactly what's happening now. How old were you when you took over? 26. Same age you are now. Luna tried to imagine shouldering the kind of responsibility at such a young age, being thrust into a world of violence and politics without warning. Her own struggles with independence seemed trivial in comparison. How did your father die? She asked gently. Dante's expression darkened, his hand tightening around his glass. Cancer, officially, but I've always suspected the Torino family accelerated his decline with some kind of slow-acting poison. Nothing I could ever prove, but the timing was too convenient for their plans. Luna felt a chill run down her spine. So they've been trying to eliminate Romano leadership for years. Vincent Torino is nothing if not patient. He knew a direct war would be too costly, so he's been waiting for opportunities to weaken us from within, stealing our allies, corrupting our people, and now trying to remove me permanently. And I ruined their perfect plan by warning you. You saved my life, Dante said firmly. But yes, your interference has forced them to accelerate their timeline. They're being more direct now, more reckless, which is why they're coming after me specifically. Dante nodded grimly. If they can't kill me, they'll try to use you as leverage, take you hostage, threaten to hurt you unless I surrender territory or make other concessions. Luna absorbed this information, trying to process the reality of being hunted by professional criminals. It should have terrified her, but instead she found herself feeling strangely calm. Weren't you telling me? She asked. Dante looked surprised by her perceptiveness. What makes you think there's more? You keep avoiding eye contact when you talk about the timeline. There's something specific that's making this situation more urgent than you're admitting. Dante was quiet for so long that Luna thought he might refuse to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with something that might have been shame. Vincent's son Marcus is pushing for immediate action. He's young, hot-headed, and he wants to prove himself to his father. Marcus doesn't have the patience for careful planning that Vincent does. That doesn't sound like something you'd be ashamed to tell me. It's not that. It's what Marcus is threatening to do if his father doesn't approve more aggressive tactics. Which is, Dante met her eyes directly for the first time since this conversation started. He's threatening to target civilians. Families of my men, innocent people who have nothing to do with our business. He wants to turn this into a war that will destroy everything my father built. Luna felt the blood drain from her face. So this isn't just about territory anymore. No, this is about the kind of organization we're going to be. Whether we maintain the code of honor my father established, or whether we become the kind of criminals who use innocent people as weapons. I understand why you didn't want to tell me that. Dante leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and Luna could see the weight of impossible decisions crushing down on him. This man, who could handle armed assassins without breaking a sweat, was being slowly destroyed by the moral complexities of his position. Tell me about your father, Luna said softly. What was he like? Dante's expression softened slightly, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. He was a complicated man, ruthless when he needed to be, but he had principles. He never hurt anyone who didn't pose a direct threat to our family. He took care of his neighborhood, made sure families had what they needed, settled disputes fairly. You loved him, more than anything. He wasn't perfect, but he was trying to build something better than what he'd inherited. A criminal organization with honor, with limits. And now you're trying to honor that legacy while the world changes around you. Every day, I make decisions that would disappoint him. Every compromise feels like a betrayal of what he stood for. But if I don't adapt, if I don't become harder than he was, everyone who depends on us will suffer. Luna saw the loneliness in his profile, the isolation that came from carrying secrets and responsibilities that no one else could fully understand. She recognized it because she'd carried her own version of that burden her entire life. "I know what it's like to be alone with impossible choices," she said quietly. Dante turned to look at her, something vulnerable flickering in his expression. "When I was 16, Luna continued, there was a family interested in adopting me. The Hendersons. They seemed perfect. Nice house, stable income, said all the right things about wanting to give me a real home. What happened? I found out that Mr. Henderson had been inappropriate with one of the younger foster girls in their care. She was only 12, too scared to report it herself. I had to make a choice between my chance at a family and protecting someone who couldn't protect herself. What did you choose?" I reported him. The adoption fell through, obviously. The Hendersons were investigated and banned from fostering. I aged out of the system 2 years later without ever getting another placement. Dante studied her face with something like awe. "You gave up everything to protect someone else, just like you're doing every day. You could walk away from all this, leave Chicago, start over somewhere else. But you won't, because too many people depend on you. It's not the same thing, isn't it? We both know what it's like to sacrifice our own happiness for the greater good. We both know what it feels like to be alone with the weight of other people's lives in our hands." Dante was quiet for a long moment, processing her words. Luna had never spoken about her decision regarding the Hendersons so openly. Most people didn't understand why she'd thrown away her chance at a family for the sake of a stranger. "I've never met anyone who understood that choice," Dante said finally. "I've never met anyone who carried the same burden." They sat in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts. Luna felt something shifting between them, a deeper connection forming through shared understanding. They were both people who put others before themselves, who'd learned to be strong because weakness wasn't an option. Dante's phone rang, shattering the peaceful moment. Luna watched his expression change as he listened to whoever was calling, his face growing darker with each passing second. When he demanded, his voice sharp with fury, Luna's stomach dropped. Something had happened. "How many people were there?" Dante continued. "Did anyone get hurt?" The protective rage building in Dante's voice made Luna's skin prickle with apprehension. "No, absolutely not. Increase security at all our locations immediately. And give me everything we have on Marcus Torino's recent activities." When he hung up, Dante's hand was shaking with barely controlled anger. "What happened?" Luna asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "The Torino family sent people to Meridian. They questioned your former coworkers about you, threatened them if they didn't provide information about your habits, your address, your schedule." Luna felt sick. "Did they hurt anyone?" "Not yet. But Derek gave them everything they wanted to know. Your full name, your apartment address, even the name of the grocery store where you shop." The betrayal shouldn't have surprised her, but still stung. Derek had been willing to poison a customer for money. Of course he'd sell out an employee to protect himself. "So they know everything about my life now. Everything that matters, yes. And Luna, there's more." She braced herself. "They left a message for me through one of your coworkers. They want to meet tomorrow night to discuss terms for your safe return. I'm not their prisoner. I'm here by choice. They don't see it that way. To them, you're leverage. A way to force me into negotiations I don't want to have." Dante stood abruptly and began pacing, his careful control finally cracking under the strain. Luna watched him move like a caged predator, all restless energy and barely contained violence. "They think they can threaten you to control me," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "They think they can use your safety as a weapon against everything I've built. What are you going to do?" Dante stopped pacing and turned to face her, his green-gray eyes blazing with something that sent heat shooting through Luna's veins. "I'm going to make them regret ever learning your name." The deadly certainty in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, Luna felt her pulse quicken with something that wasn't entirely fear. This was Dante in his element, the dangerous man who commanded respect through the threat of violence. And he was using that power to protect her. "How?" she asked. "Tomorrow night, when they expect me to show up begging for your safe return, I'm going to remind them why the Romano family has held our territory for 40 years. You're going to kill them." It wasn't a question. Luna could see the decision in his face, the cold calculation that meant Marcus Torino and whoever he brought with him wouldn't be leaving that meeting alive. Yes, Dante said simply. I'm going to eliminate the threat permanently. Luna stood and moved closer to him, close enough to see the gold flecks in his eyes, close enough to smell his cologne mixed with the faint scent of whiskey. I don't want you to do this for me, she said quietly. I'm not doing it for you. Dante's voice was rough with emotion. I'm doing it because they threatened something that belongs to me. The possessive way he said belongs to me should have bothered her. Luna had spent her entire adult life fiercely independent, never belonging to anyone, never letting anyone claim ownership over her choices or her safety. Instead, she found herself stepping even closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. Do I belong to you, Dante? His control finally snapped. One moment they were standing apart, having a conversation about violence and territory. The next, Dante's hands were framing her face and his mouth was on hers with a hunger that stole her breath. Luna melted into him, her hands fisting in the fabric of his shirt as she kissed him back with months of loneliness and need pouring out of her. He tasted like whiskey and something darker, something that was purely him, and she couldn't get enough. Dante walked her backward until her legs hit the sofa, never breaking the kiss. His hands tangled in her hair, tilting her head to deepen the contact, and Luna heard herself make a sound that was half gasp, half moan. Tell me to stop, Dante whispered against her lips, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining control. Luna looked into his eyes, seeing the desire there, but also the restraint, the way he was giving her the choice despite his own obvious need. I don't want you to stop, she whispered back. Something primitive and possessive flashed across Dante's features. He lifted her easily, settling her on the sofa with a gentleness that contrasted beautifully with the intensity in his eyes. Are you sure, Luna? Once we cross this line, everything changes between us. Luna reached up to cup his face, her thumb tracing the sharp line of his cheekbone. Everything already changed the moment I decided to save your life. Dante leaned into her touch, his eyes falling closed for a moment, as if he were memorizing the sensation. I need you to know, he said quietly, that this isn't just about protection anymore. It's not just about keeping you safe from my enemies. What is it about? It's about the fact that I can't imagine my life without you in it. It's about wanting to wake up to you every morning and fall asleep with you in my arms every night. It's about being terrified that once this threat is over, you'll walk away and I'll go back to being alone. The vulnerability in his confession made Luna's chest tight with emotion. This powerful, dangerous man was laying his heart bare for her, admitting to needs and fears that probably no one else had ever seen. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered. Dante's kiss was softer this time, reverent, as if she were something precious that might break under too much pressure. Luna sank into the gentleness, into the way he touched her like she mattered more than anything else in his world. When his hands moved to the hem of her sweater, his fingers barely grazing the skin of her waist, Luna arched into the contact with a soft sound of encouragement. You're so beautiful, Dante murmured against her throat, his lips finding the sensitive spot where her pulse jumped under his attention. Luna had never thought of herself as particularly beautiful. Pretty enough, maybe, but not the kind of stunning that stopped traffic or inspired poetry. But the way Dante looked at her, the reverence in his touch, made her feel like the most gorgeous woman in the world. Their clothes disappeared slowly, each piece removed with careful attention and whispered endearments. Dante took his time exploring every inch of skin he revealed, mapping her body with his hands and mouth until Luna was trembling with need. When he paused to look at her, really look at her, Luna felt heat rise in her cheeks under the intensity of his gaze. Perfect, he said quietly, and the sincerity in his voice made her believe him. Their lovemaking was slow and thorough, filled with soft gasps and murmured words of need and affection. Dante was incredibly gentle, checking in with her constantly, making sure she was comfortable, making sure she wanted everything he was giving her. Luna had never experienced anything like the way he touched her, The way he focused entirely on her pleasure before his own. By the time he finally joined with her, she was desperate for him, her body singing with tension and desire. The connection was overwhelming, both physical and emotional. Luna felt tears prick her eyes at the intensity of it, at the way Dante held her like she was the most precious thing he'd ever touched. Afterwards, they lay tangled together on the sofa, Luna's head on Dante's chest as his fingers combed through her hair. She could hear his heartbeat slowly returning to normal, could feel the contentment in the way his body had relaxed beneath hers. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now," Dante said, his voice rough with satisfaction and something deeper. "Now you really do belong to me. And I belong to you." Luna lifted her head to meet his gaze, seeing the sincerity there along with something that might have been love. "Are you afraid?" she asked, echoing his question from their first night together. Terrified, Dante admitted, "But not of my enemies. I'm afraid of how much I need you. I'm afraid of what I'd be willing to do to keep you safe and happy." Luna pressed a soft kiss to his chest, right over his heart. "You don't have to be afraid of that," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." As night fell over Chicago, they talked quietly about the future, about what would happen after the Torino threat was eliminated, about the possibility of building something real together despite the violence that surrounded Dante's world. For the first time since this all began, Luna felt truly hopeful. She'd found something she'd never expected to have. A man who understood her, who valued her independence while still wanting to protect her, who made her feel like she'd finally found the home she'd been searching for her entire life. Tomorrow would bring danger and difficult decisions. But tonight, wrapped in Dante's arms and surrounded by his promises of protection and devotion, Luna finally understood what it felt like to belong somewhere. To belong to someone who would move heaven and earth to keep her safe and happy. Luna woke wrapped in Dante's arms, her body still humming with the memory of their lovemaking. Dawn was just breaking over Lake Michigan, painting the penthouse in soft golden light. For a few precious moments, she let herself exist in the bubble of contentment that surrounded them, feeling safer and more cherished than she ever had in her life. Dante stirred beneath her, his arms tightening around her waist as consciousness returned. "Good morning, beautiful," he murmured against her hair, his voice rough with sleep and satisfaction. "Good morning," Luna replied, tilting her head to press a kiss to his jaw. She could feel him smiling against her temple, could sense the same peaceful happiness that was filling her own chest. The harsh buzz of Dante's phone shattered their intimate moment. Luna felt his body tense beneath hers as he reached for the device, his expression shifting from contentment to businesslike focus as he read the message. "What is it?" Luna asked, though the sudden rigidity in his posture already told her it was bad news. Dante was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he processed whatever information he'd received. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled in a way that made Luna's stomach clench with dread. "They took Isabella Martinez, your co-worker from Meridian. The Torino family has her." Luna sat up quickly, pulling the sheet around herself. Isabella was barely 19, a sweet girl who worked part-time while attending community college. She had nothing to do with any of this beyond the misfortune of working at the same restaurant as Luna. "Is she hurt?" Luna asked. "Not yet, but they're using her to force a meeting. They want to trade her for you." The casual way Dante said it made Luna's blood run cold. To him, this was just another tactical consideration, another move in a chess game he'd been playing his entire adult life. But Isabella was a real person with a family who loved her, dreams for her future, a life that mattered. "We have to save her," Luna said. "We will. I'm already coordinating with my security team to locate where they're holding her." "How long will that take?" Dante's expression darkened. "Could be hours, could be days. The Torino family owns several properties throughout the city where they could be keeping her." "Days?" Luna felt panic rising in her throat. "Dante, she's just a kid. She's probably terrified. We can't leave her there for days. I understand your concern, but rushing in without proper intelligence will get us all killed. These situations require patience and planning." Luna stared at him, seeing for the first time the cold calculation that made him effective as a crime boss. It was the same quality that had allowed him to survive in his dangerous world for 6 years, but right now it felt like a wall between them. "You're talking about her like she's collateral damage," Luna said, her voice sharper than she'd intended. "I'm talking about her like someone whose life depends on me making smart decisions instead of emotional ones. This isn't just about emotions. This is about doing what's right." Dante sat up, running a hand through his dark hair in frustration. "Luna, I know you want to help Isabella, but you can't let guilt cloud your judgment. The Torino family is counting on you feeling responsible for her situation. I am responsible. If I hadn't warned you that night, she'd be safe at home right now, and I'd be dead, along with the 6 men who were injured in their coordinated attacks." Luna climbed out of bed, needing distance from Dante's infuriatingly rational arguments. She found her clothes from the night before and began pulling them on, her movements sharp with agitation. "Where are you going?" Dante asked. "To get dressed, to think, to figure out how to help that girl, instead of just sitting here analyzing the situation like it's an abstract problem." Dante was on his feet immediately, his own nakedness forgotten in the face of her obvious distress. "Luna, look at me." She did, and saw something in his expression that might have been hurt. "I care about Isabella's safety too," he said quietly. "But I care about yours more. I won't risk losing you to save someone else, no matter how much you think I should." The possessive certainty in his voice should have been comforting. Instead, it felt suffocating. Luna had spent her entire life being the person who stood up for those who couldn't protect themselves. The idea of letting someone suffer because helping them might be dangerous went against everything she believed about right and wrong. "What if it were one of your men?" she asked. "One of the people who depends on you for protection. Would you still counsel patience and planning?" Dante's jaw tightened. "That's different." "How?" "Because my men chose this life. They knew the risks when they signed on. Isabella is an innocent civilian who got caught in the crossfire." "Exactly. Which means she deserves our help even more, not less." Luna finished dressing and moved toward the kitchen, needing coffee and space to think. Dante followed, pulling on his pants as he went. "I'm not saying we won't help her," he said, his voice taking on the patient tone of someone explaining something to a child. "I'm saying we need to be smart about how we do it." "How long have you been thinking like this?" Luna asked, turning to face him. "How long have you been weighing lives against each other, deciding who's worth saving and who isn't?" Dante went very still, something dangerous flickering in his green-gray eyes. "That's not what I'm doing, isn't it? You're treating Isabella like an acceptable loss because saving her might put me at risk. But what happens next week when it's someone else? What happens when your calculations tell you that keeping me safe requires sacrificing other innocent people? You're being unreasonable. Am I? Or am I finally seeing the reality of what it means to be with someone in your position?" The words hung between them like a physical barrier. Luna could see she'd hit something painful, some fear Dante carried about the moral compromises his lifestyle demanded. "You think I'm a monster?" he said quietly. "No," Luna replied, her voice gentler now. "I think you're a good man, trapped in an impossible situation. But I also think that somewhere along the way, you've forgotten that good people don't leave 19-year-old girls to suffer just because saving them is inconvenient." Dante leaned against the kitchen counter, his shoulders sagging under the weight of her criticism. When he looked up, there was something broken in his expression. "Do you know how many people I've watched die because I made the emotional choice instead of the strategic one?" he asked. "Do you know how many funerals I've attended because I let my heart override my head?" Luna moved closer, drawn by the vulnerability in his voice. 6 months after I took over the family," Dante continued, "a rival organization kidnapped the teenage daughter of one of my lieutenants. They wanted me to hand over our entire drug operation in exchange for her safe return. What did you choose?" "I chose to save the girl. Went in with 12 men, got her out safely, lost 4 good people in the process. The drug operation fell apart anyway when our enemies realized they could manipulate me through hostage situations." Luna could see the guilt eating at him, the way that decision had shaped every choice he'd made since. Those 4 men had families too, Dante said. Wives, children, parents who depended on them. I traded their lives for one girl's safety, and I've been living with that choice ever since. So you decided never to let emotion influence your decisions again. I decided to think strategically instead of letting my feelings get people killed. Luna understood now why he'd seemed so cold about Isabella's situation. He wasn't heartless. He was terrified of making the same mistake twice. But she also understood something he seemed to have forgotten. That girl you saved, Luna said softly. She's alive right now because of your choice. She got to graduate high school, maybe go to college, fall in love, have a future. That matters too. Not enough to justify the cost. Luna reached out to cup his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. Dante, you can't save everyone, but that doesn't mean you stop trying to save anyone. For a long moment, they stood there in the growing morning light, both lost in their own thoughts about right and wrong, about the price of love and loyalty. Dante's phone buzzed with another message. He glanced at it, his expression growing grimmer. They're moving her, he said. My contacts think they're planning to relocate Isabella to a more secure location, which means if we're going to save her, it has to be soon. Luna, I can't ask you to do this. If something happens to you, you're not asking. I'm telling you, we're going to save that girl, and I'm going to help. Dante studied her face, seeing the determination there, the unwillingness to compromise on something she felt was morally necessary. All right, he said finally, but we do this my way. My plan, my team, my rules. As long as your rules include actually rescuing Isabella, instead of just analyzing the situation until it's too late. Despite the tension between them, Dante's mouth quirked in what might have been admiration. You're going to be the death of me, Luna Castellanos. Only if you're lucky, Luna replied, and was rewarded with a genuine smile. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation and planning. Dante's security team located the warehouse where Isabella was being held, confirmed that she was alive and apparently unharmed, and identified the number of guards and their patrol patterns. Luna listened to the tactical discussions with growing anxiety and determination. Isabella was being held in a Torino family facility on the south side, guarded by at least 8 armed men. The rescue would require precise timing, superior firepower, and more than a little luck. Your job, Dante told Luna as they prepared to leave the penthouse, is to stay in the car and wait for my signal. Once we confirm Isabella is safe, you'll drive her straight to the hospital while my men and I handle cleanup. Luna nodded, though she could already feel that the plan was going to go differently than Dante hoped. The warehouse district was dark and industrial, all abandoned buildings and broken streetlights. Luna could feel her heart hammering against her ribs as they approached the target location. But underneath the fear was a steady current of determination. This was the right thing to do, regardless of the risk. The rescue itself happened quickly. Dante and his men moved with military precision, neutralizing guards and securing the building with an efficiency that reminded Luna of exactly how dangerous the man she'd fallen in love with really was. But when they reached the room where Isabella was supposed to be held, they found only a hastily abandoned chair and a note that made Dante's face go white with rage. Too slow, Romano. The girl is on her way to our boat. Try to stop us and she dies. Luna saw the defeat in Dante's expression, the way his shoulders sagged as he realized they'd been outmaneuvered. The marina, she said suddenly. I know which boat they're talking about. Everyone turned to look at her. Dante's eyes were sharp with sudden hope. Derek used to brag about the Torino family's yacht, Luna continued. Said they used it for special occasions when they needed privacy. It's docked at Burnham Harbor. How can you be sure? Because Derek was always trying to impress the waitresses with his connections to important people. He described that boat in detail, thought it made him sound sophisticated. Dante was already moving, his team falling into formation around him as they headed for the exit. Luna stayed close to Dante as they raced through the night toward the harbor. She could see the tension in his shoulders, could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. If they were too late, if Isabella was hurt or killed because of decisions he'd made, Luna knew he'd carry that guilt for the rest of his life. The marina was dark and quiet, luxury boats bobbing gently in their slips. Dante's team spread out to cover all possible escape routes, while he and Luna approached the slip where the Torino yacht was moored. They could see lights in the cabin, hear voices carrying across the water. Isabella was there. Luna was certain of it. What she wasn't prepared for was the way everything went wrong so quickly. The confrontation was brief and violent. Dante and his men moved to secure the boat, but the Torino guards had been expecting them. Gunfire erupted in the darkness, muzzle flashes lighting up the night like deadly fireworks. Luna saw Isabella crouched in the boat's cabin, crying and clearly terrified, but apparently unharmed. Without thinking, she broke from her position behind the cover of a piling and ran toward the boat. "Luna, no." Dante's voice cut through the chaos, sharp with terror and fury. She almost made it. Luna had nearly reached the boat when she felt something burn across her shoulder, spinning her around and sending her crashing to the dock. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, but she could hear Isabella screaming and knew she had to keep moving. Dante appeared at her side within seconds, his face white with panic and rage as he assessed her injury. The bullet had grazed her shoulder, painful but not life-threatening. "Stay down," he ordered, his voice shaking with emotion. "Don't move until this is over." The rest of the confrontation was over in minutes. Dante's team overwhelmed the remaining guards while Dante himself dealt with Marcus Torino in a brief, brutal encounter that left no doubt about who was the more dangerous man. When the shooting stopped, Luna was sitting on the dock with her back against a piling, pressing a makeshift bandage to her shoulder while Isabella sobbed in relief beside her. Dante approached them, his face still pale, but his movements steady and controlled. He knelt beside Luna, his hands gentle as he examined her wound. "How bad is it?" Luna asked. "You'll live, but you need stitches. And you scared 10 years off my life when you ran toward that boat. I had to help her." "I know." Dante's voice was soft with something that might have been awe. "I know you did." At the hospital, Luna sat patiently while a doctor stitched up her shoulder, listening to Isabella tearfully thank her for helping with the rescue. The girl was shaken but unharmed, and her family was on their way to take her home. "You saved my life," Isabella said, squeezing Luna's uninjured hand. "I don't know how to thank you." "Just be safe," Luna replied, "and maybe find a new job somewhere that doesn't involve crime families." Isabella's laugh was shaky but genuine. Already looking into that. When they were finally alone, Dante sat heavily in the chair beside Luna's hospital bed. He looked exhausted, drained by the night's events and the terror of nearly losing her. "I thought I'd lost you," he said quietly. "When I saw you fall, when I saw the blood, I thought—" Luna reached out to touch his face, feeling the tension in his jaw. "I am okay. We're both okay. This time. What about next time? What happens when loving me puts you in danger again?" Luna had been thinking about this question since the moment she'd made the choice to run toward that boat. Loving Dante meant accepting a life filled with violence and moral complexity, situations where doing the right thing might get them both killed. It also meant having someone who would move heaven and earth to protect the people she cared about, someone who understood the weight of responsibility and the cost of making hard choices. "There will always be a next time," she said finally. "Your world is dangerous, and there will always be people who want to hurt you or the people you care about. So why stay? Why choose this life when you could walk away and be safe?" Luna was quiet for a moment, considering her answer carefully. "Because I love you," she said simply. "Because when I'm with you, I feel like I've finally found my home. Because even when you make choices I disagree with, I understand that you're trying to do the best you can in an impossible situation." Dante's eyes filled with something that looked like tears. "Luna, I love you too. More than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. But I'm terrified that loving you is going to get you killed. Then we'll have to make sure that doesn't happen." "How?" "By being partners. By making decisions together instead of you trying to protect me from everything. By trusting each other to be strong enough to handle whatever comes next." Dante leaned forward to press his forehead against hers, his hands cradling her face like she was the most precious thing in his world. "Partners," he repeated, as if testing how the word felt. "Partners," Luna confirmed. "In everything." As dawn broke over Chicago for the second time since they'd first made love, Luna felt a deep sense of certainty settle in her chest. This life wouldn't be easy. There would be danger and difficult choices and moments when the cost of love seemed too high to pay. But there would also be this: Dante's hands in her hair, his promise to love and protect her, the knowledge that she'd finally found someone worth fighting for. Someone worth belonging to completely and without reservation. 2 weeks after the Marina confrontation, Luna's shoulder had healed to a dull ache, and the Torino family threat had escalated to open war. Vincent Torino was no longer interested in subtle maneuvering or strategic patience. His son Marcus was dead, killed during the rescue of Isabella Martinez, and the old man wanted blood. Luna stood beside Dante in his study, looking at surveillance photos and intelligence reports spread across his desk. She was no longer the frightened bartender who'd stumbled into his world by accident. The past weeks had transformed her into something harder, more aware, someone who understood the weight of life and death decisions. "Vincent has called for a meeting," Dante said, his finger tracing the location marked on a map of Chicago. "Tomorrow night, neutral territory. He wants to discuss terms for ending this war." "It's a trap," Luna said immediately. "He has no intention of negotiating." "I know, but it's also an opportunity to end this permanently." Luna studied Dante's profile, noting the determined set of his jaw. She'd learned to read the subtle signs of his mood, the way his hands moved when he was planning violence, the particular stillness that came over him before decisive action. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking that Vincent Torino has spent the last 2 weeks underestimating both of us. He sees you as my weakness, something he can exploit to manipulate me. He doesn't realize that you become my greatest strength." Luna felt warmth spread through her chest at his words, but also a flutter of apprehension. "Tell me your plan." Dante turned to face her fully, his green-gray eyes serious. "Vincent expects me to come alone or with minimal backup, probably hoping to overwhelm me with superior numbers. Instead, I want you there, as my partner, my equal, representing the Romano family alongside me." Luna's breath caught. "You want me to be part of the actual confrontation? I want them to see that threatening you is the worst mistake they ever made. I want them to understand that we're not just allies or lovers. We're partners in every sense of the word, and anyone who comes for one of us has to deal with both of us." The idea should have terrified her, but instead Luna felt a surge of fierce pride. This was what she'd wanted when she'd argued for true partnership. Dante wasn't trying to protect her from his world anymore. He was asking her to stand beside him in it. "What would you need me to do?" she asked. "Vincent will expect me to be emotional, to make mistakes, because I'm angry about the threats against you. But if you're there, calm and composed, it will throw off his entire strategy. You'll be proof that we're stronger together than either of us is alone. And if things go wrong, then we face whatever comes together. No more leaving you behind for your safety. No more making unilateral decisions about our future. We stand as equals or we fall as equals." Luna looked at the map again, at the warehouse location where Vincent Torino wanted to meet. It was isolated, defensible, probably chosen specifically because it would be easy to eliminate anyone who attended. She thought about the scared girl who'd slipped that warning note to a stranger 3 weeks ago. That Luna would have run from this situation, would have chosen safety over confrontation every time. But that Luna had never had anyone worth fighting for. "All right," she said. "Let's finish this." The next evening, Luna dressed carefully in dark clothing that would allow for movement, but still commanded respect. She checked the small pistol Dante had insisted she carry, making sure it was secure in its concealed holster. 3 weeks ago, she'd never touched a gun. Now she could field strip and reassemble the weapon in under 2 minutes. Dante emerged from their bedroom, wearing a charcoal suit that made him look like the dangerous gentleman he truly was. But it was the way he looked at Luna that took her breath away, the pride and love and absolute confidence in his expression. "Ready?" he asked, offering her his arm. "Ready," Luna confirmed. They drove through Chicago in comfortable silence, both lost in their own thoughts about what the evening might bring. Luna found herself thinking about the conversation they'd had that morning, about the future they were fighting to protect. "After this is over," Dante had said while they shared breakfast, "I want to help you open that restaurant. Not as charity, not as my way of taking care of you, but as an investment in our shared future." Luna had looked up from her coffee, surprised by the offer. "You want to invest in my culinary dreams? I want to invest in us. Your restaurant, our home, whatever life we want to build together. Equal partners in everything, remember?" The memory warmed Luna as they approached the warehouse district. Whatever happened tonight, she and Dante would face it together. And if they survived, they'd build something beautiful together. The warehouse was exactly as isolated and ominous as Luna had expected. Vincent Torino's men were already in position, dark figures stationed around the building's perimeter. But Dante's security team had arrived hours earlier, and Luna could see the subtle signs of their counter-surveillance. Vincent was waiting inside the main floor of the warehouse, flanked by 6 heavily armed men. He was older than Luna had expected, probably in his early 70s, with silver hair and the kind of expensive clothes that spoke of old money and older power. "Dante Romano," Vincent said as they approached. "I see you brought your pet Bartender." Luna felt Dante's tension spike beside her, but she placed a gentle hand on his arm and stepped forward before he could respond. "Luna Castellanos," she said, extending her hand to Vincent with perfect composure. "Partner in the Romano family organization. I understand you've been asking about me." Vincent's eyes narrowed as he studied her, clearly reassessing whatever assumptions he'd made about her role in Dante's life. "You're not what I expected," he admitted. "I rarely am," Luna replied with a slight smile. "Shall we discuss the terms of your surrender?" The bold statement sent ripples of tension through Vincent's men, but the old crime boss actually chuckled. "I like her, Dante. She has steel. Shame she chose the losing side." "We'll see about that," Dante said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute confidence. The negotiation that followed was really more of a verbal chess match, each side probing for weakness while positioning for advantage. Luna found herself impressed by Dante's strategic mind, the way he could read Vincent's tells and counter every argument. But she also saw the moment when talking stopped being useful. Vincent's hand moved toward his jacket in a gesture that was almost casual, but Luna had learned to watch for such things. She drew her own weapon with smooth precision, her movement perfectly synchronized with Dante's. The confrontation was brief and decisive. Vincent's men were well-trained, but they'd underestimated their opponents. Dante moved with lethal efficiency while Luna provided cover, their coordination seamless. When the shooting stopped, Vincent Torino was dead and his organization was effectively leaderless. The war that had threatened to tear apart Chicago's criminal underworld was over. Standing in the aftermath, Luna realized that she felt no guilt about the violence they'd just participated in. These men had threatened innocent people, had kidnapped a teenager, had forced this confrontation through their own choices. "It's finished," Dante said, holstering his weapon and turning to face her. "Yes," Luna agreed. "It is." The drive back to the penthouse was quiet, both of them processing what they'd accomplished together. They'd eliminated a serious threat to their safety and their future. But more importantly, they'd proven to themselves and each other that they could function as true partners in even the most dangerous situations. 3 months later, Luna stood in the kitchen of Romano's, her new restaurant in Little Italy, putting the finishing touches on the evening's special menu. The space was everything she'd dreamed of, intimate and warm, with an open kitchen that allowed diners to watch the culinary artistry, walls decorated with photos of Chicago's Italian-American community. The restaurant had opened to rave reviews, food critics praising Luna's innovative fusion of Mexican and Italian flavors. More importantly, it had become a gathering place for the neighborhood, exactly what she'd hoped to create. Dante appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking devastatingly handsome in a dark suit, his green-gray eyes warm with pride as he watched her work. "Table 7 wants to compliment the chef," he said with a smile that made her stomach flutter exactly the way it had that first night. "Table 7, Luna repeated, setting down her knife. "That's a coincidence, is it?" Dante's smile widened. "Maybe you should go see what they want." Luna wiped her hands on her apron and followed Dante out to the dining room, curious about this mysterious request. Table 7 was tucked in the back corner of the restaurant, just like it had been at Meridian, but the similarity ended there. Instead of a poison attempt, she found the table set with champagne and roses, Dante standing beside it with something small and velvet in his hand. Luna's breath caught as she realized what was happening. "3 months ago, you saved my life in a restaurant," Dante said, his voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet dining room. "Tonight, I want to ask you to save it again. Every day, for the rest of our lives." He dropped to one knee, opening the small box to reveal a ring that caught the restaurant's warm lighting and threw it back in brilliant sparkles. "Luna Castellanos, will you marry me?" Luna looked down at the man she loved, seeing past his dangerous reputation to the vulnerability and hope in his expression. Around them, the restaurant had gone completely silent, staff and diners alike holding their breath for her answer. She thought about the journey that had brought them here, the scared young woman who'd risked everything to save a stranger, the crime boss who'd learned to open his heart to love. They'd both been changed by their connection, made stronger and better by choosing each other. "Yes," Luna said, her voice steady and sure. "Yes, I'll marry you." The restaurant erupted in cheers as Dante slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her with a passion that made her forget they had an audience. When they finally broke apart, Luna could see tears of happiness in his eyes. "I love you, Luna Romano," he whispered against her ear. "I love you too," she replied, testing how her new name sounded. Their wedding 6 weeks later was a perfect blend of both their worlds. The ceremony took place in the garden of Dante's family estate, surrounded by Romano family members who'd welcomed Luna with genuine warmth and staff from a restaurant who'd become like family to her. Luna wore her grandmother's wedding dress, altered to fit her perfectly, while Dante looked magnificent in a traditional black tuxedo. As they exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising to be partners in all things, Luna felt a profound sense of completion. When Dante kissed her as his wife for the first time, the assembled crowd cheered with genuine joy for the couple who'd found love in the most unlikely circumstances. The wedding reception was held at Romano's. The restaurant transformed into a celebration space filled with laughter, music, and the best food Luna had ever prepared. She danced with her new husband as their guests celebrated around them, feeling like the luckiest woman in the world. "We did it," Dante murmured as they swayed together to the gentle music. "We built something beautiful together." "This is just the beginning," Luna replied, thinking about all the dreams they still wanted to pursue together. 1 year later, Luna stood in the same spot where Dante had proposed, one hand resting on her rounded belly while the other held a positive pregnancy test. Romano's was busier than ever, booked solid for the next 3 months, and had just received a James Beard nomination for Best New Restaurant. Dante emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 cups of her favorite decaffeinated tea, a concession to her pregnancy that he'd insisted on despite her protests that 1 cup of coffee wouldn't hurt the baby. "Good news or bad news?" Luna asked, holding up the test. Dante's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, joy, wonder, and finally pure happiness. "The best news," he said, setting down their tea so he could pull her into his arms. "Are you ready to be a father?" Luna asked, suddenly nervous about how this would change their lives. "I'm ready for anything as long as I have you," Dante replied, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. As Luna looked around the restaurant they'd built together, at the life they'd created from the ashes of that terrifying night 3 years ago, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She'd started this journey as a lonely young woman with no family, no real connections, no sense of where she belonged. Now she was surrounded by love, a husband who adored her, a business that fulfilled her creative dreams, a child on the way, and a found family that had embraced her completely. The evening dinner service was just beginning, and Luna could see couples settling into tables throughout the restaurant. Young lovers sharing their first fancy dinner together, married couples celebrating anniversaries, families gathering for special occasions. She thought about all the love stories that would unfold in this space, all the connections that would be made over food and wine and conversation. It made her think of everyone watching their story unfold, everyone who'd been rooting for them from the beginning. I hope all of you watching have found your own version of this happiness, Luna said quietly, though she knew no one could hear her. And if you haven't found it yet, I hope you never stop believing it's possible. Sometimes love comes when you least expect it, in the most dangerous circumstances, from the last person you'd ever imagine choosing. Dante looked at her curiously. What are you thinking about? Just how grateful I am, Luna replied. For all of it. The danger, the fear, the uncertainty. Because it led me to you. As the sun set over Chicago, painting their restaurant in warm golden light, Luna and Dante prepared for another evening of serving people who came seeking good food and finding community. It was exactly the life Luna had dreamed of, made even more perfect by sharing it with the man who taught her that love was worth any risk. That night, as they closed the restaurant and headed home to the penthouse they transformed into a real home filled with warmth and personal touches, Luna thought about the scared young woman who'd slipped a warning note to a dangerous stranger. That Luna had been trying to save a life. She'd had no idea she was actually saving two lives, his and her own. Now, with her hand in Dante's and their future stretching ahead of them bright with possibility, Luna knew with absolute certainty that every choice had been worth it. Every moment of fear, every difficult decision, every sacrifice had led them to this perfect life they'd built together. As they walked through the Chicago night, passing the spot where their story had begun, Luna smiled at the memory of that first terrifying and life-changing encounter. She'd asked her viewers a question that night about split-second decisions and life changes. Now she had the answer. Sometimes the most dangerous choice is also the most beautiful one. Sometimes saving someone else's life is actually the beginning of saving your own. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that dangerous choice leads you home to the love you never knew you were searching for.